Just trying out some intro music for my podcast. Sounds kind of like a bad 1980s sitcom intro, but I don't know. Tried to be a little bit perky with it. Anyway, good evening and welcome to Randomcast. I'm the host, Timothy Barrett, and Randomcast is my Friday evening podcast in which I attempt to explore a random list of current events, news stories, what have you, giving my brilliant or not so brilliant commentary, and certainly trying to do so from a biblical perspective. Now, I want you to know that I reserve the right to revise and extend my remarks. I acknowledge that any expressed analysis, views, opinions, etc., in this podcast may change over time as new and or better information and understanding and application of biblical principles become known to me. Most of all, I'm hopeful that viewers of this content will provide meaningful and helpful comments. Randomcast is sponsored by Bradford Christian College. You'll find the link to the Bradford Christian College website in the description below. And that is an online college offering a number of degrees at the bachelor level, offering a Master of Arts in Theological Studies as well. It's a completely online program, but it is not an alone program. You are assigned a mentor who walks with you through your program, meets with you via Zoom, and challenges you with questions about your studies, is there to help you understand better the concepts and maybe even look to some further application of what you're studying. But certainly willing to desiring to walk with you through the entirety of your program, so that you can be successful in your educational pursuits with Bradford Christian College. That's bradfordchristiancollege.com. Please do visit that website, contact them for more information, and see if perhaps it's not a program that would be beneficial to you or someone you know. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Now, for the most part, on my Friday random cast, I haven't looked at these news stories. I may have some idea of what the news stories are about, but for the most part, I haven't looked at the news stories. I'm simply taking what appear to be the current top headlines of news at this time, and we'll look at the news story, and I'll try to provide some kind of meaningful commentary, and of course, would welcome any and all comments in regards to that article. So let's start with this news article here from Right Scoop. Kash Patel releases investigation info on wannabe Trump assassin Thomas Crooks. All right, so that's interesting. The first thing I'll say, it's interesting that FBI is releasing information, I guess. All right. FBI Director Kash Patel has just released investigative information on Thomas Crooks and the near assassination of President Trump, which took place on July 24. They found that Crooks acted alone and not at the behest of any foreign or domestic entity. Okay, well, over 480 FBI employees were involved in the Thomas Crooks investigation. Seems like a lot of chefs in the kitchen, but okay. Employees conducted over 1,000 interviews, addressed over 2,000 public tips, analyzed data extracted from 13 seized digital devices, reviewed nearly 500,000 digital files, collected, processed, and synchronized hundreds of hours of video footage, analyzed financial activity from 10 different accounts, and examined data associated with 25 social media or online forum accounts. Okay, so my first, now this, I'm certain that this is going to change as we read this article, but my first reaction is, well, I thought he didn't have a social activity. I thought he was, when it came to him on the interwebs, there wasn't anything there. So what are they looking at, right? I mean, what are the 25 social media or online forum accounts that they're looking at? Like, we'll see if the article tells us. The FBI's investigation into Thomas Crooks identified and examined over 20 online accounts data extracted from over a dozen electronic devices, examination of numerous financial accounts, and over 1,000 interviews and 2,000 public tips. Well, okay, so are we just going for length of report here? Because we just said all this, right? Everything, everything they just said in that paragraph, it said in the previous paragraph, although in the previous paragraph it was financial activity from 10 different accounts. Here it says they examined over 20 online accounts. In the first paragraph, it was 25 social media or online forum accounts. 1,000 interviews, 2,000 public tips, 2,000 public tips. Um, Having been a teacher for a long time, this is like the student that knows they're going to be short on the number of words that they've been assigned to write, and so they repeat. The investigation conducted by over 480 FBI employees, I wonder where I read that before, revealed Crooks had limited online and in-person interactions, planned and conducted the attack alone, and did not leak or share his intent to engage in the attack with anyone. Okay. So you had limited online and in-person interactions. I don't know if you had 25 social media or online forum accounts, is that limited? I don't know. I have no clue. I am not an online person. I can barely do what I'm doing right now. So I have no clue whether 25 different social media or online forum accounts is limited. Now, I guess you could have those accounts and not do anything with them. I suppose I have accounts that I don't do anything with somewhere. It's hard to keep track of all the accounts you end up setting up online, right? But all right, so I think this is simply this right here. Okay. Um, okay, then he did this because of all the misinformation spewed about President Trump ahead of the election by despicable Democrats. I mean, what else could it be if he didn't do it at the behest of anyone else, foreign or domestic? All right, so that's the conclusion that the right scoop comes to, right? So yeah, so um, okay, so um, he acted alone, all right, and all that stuff that you investigated. What did you determine his motive was? You didn't you care to share? Um, this is the thing about okay, well, I kind of have two opposing views here, right? So uh Kash Patel, I think, had promised that his FBI was going to be the most transparent FBI ever, right? So now I don't know if that's good or bad, frankly. I don't know if an organization like the FBI is supposed to be transparent. I just don't know. I mean, um, I think so-called transparency can actually create more issues than it can help to resolve. But um, this kind of information right here is okay. I would say if an organization is seeking to be transparent, this is the introductory information to leading into transparency. Okay. This doesn't reflect transparency, right? They don't say in this, okay, can you give us an idea of the type of people you interviewed? Obviously, you don't have to give us names or anything, but we interviewed people from his hometown, people at his school, um, right? Um, give us some information about the public tips, right? Out of 2,000 public tips, we found that 1,000 of them were, false or um, uh, there was nothing to them, or 13 seized digital devices. Okay, so what digital devices were they, right? A number of cell phones that he may have had, a laptop, a iPad. What were those devices? See, that's starting to get into what I would say is transparency. Okay. What kind of information? Again, I don't know that you have to get um, detailed in this, but what kind of information did you uncover? Okay. Um, Financial activity from 10 different accounts. Okay. I don't know why they couldn't tell us what those accounts were. And was money coming in interestingly being deposited in those accounts? Was it money interestingly being withdrawn from those accounts? Right. So this um, release of investigation info, to my mind, doesn't reflect transparency. In fact, I would argue, now maybe they will follow this up with a release of some other information. I don't know. But to my mind, this is actually not transparency. This is the kind of release you give when you don't want to give a transparent look at the investigation. Okay. Um, Now, I don't know that the FBI should be transparent about anything. I don't know. Um, I don't know that that's necessary. We we have this idea that uh, transparency is necessarily a good thing, and I don't think that's true. Okay. Um, if you think about interactions within a church, right? There are some things that would come to a pastor, an elder of a church, from a member of that church that, the elder or the pastor isn't required to be transparent and spread the news about what was brought up, what was brought to their attention. In fact, I think there's a lot of wisdom in keeping the circles small regarding matters that come up. And I think it's an important characteristic of Christians to not insist upon being included in that circle, right? I mean, if we elect leaders, representatives, based upon their character to entrust in them that the responsibility of managing such things, then we should act like it, and we should let them manage those things, um, and leave it at that. So I don't I don't know that transparency is actually the obligation of the FBI. I want to be able to trust them that they do the proper investigation, and based upon the evidence that they uncover, they take the proper action. Okay. I want to trust my county sheriff. I want to trust my local police department to do that sort of thing. Okay. So I guess that I'm supposed to understand that Thomas Crooks, a seemingly unremarkable person, um, in whatever way, on his own, without engaging anyone else, without being engaged by anyone else, uh, orchestrated that event and nearly um, killed a candidate for the office of the president. Now, I think one reason why there could be skepticism about this conclusion is because we have had a long history of skepticism about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And I guess we now think we have a better understanding, although there's still some controversy about that, I suppose. But we think we have a better understanding of what went on with the JFK assassination. Now, the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, I don't think there's ever been any controversy surrounding that. Um, it seems that the motivation of that individual was investigated and well substantiated, and um, that sat well with the public. Again, here, um, at least at this point, I guess the FBI wants us to be satisfied with their conclusion that he planned and conducted the attack alone. Okay, and I guess maybe we don't need to know the motive. All right. Now I notice here in another list of articles, the Intel report, Thomas Crook's alleged social media dump. Let's see what this says here. Today, Tucker Carlson published an investigative report that reveals an extensive collection of social media accounts and digital records his team claims belong to Thomas Matthew Crooks. I've independently obtained the same source document Tucker used, which contains Crook's alleged full online history. The source explicitly states that this material was repeatedly offered to the FBI, which had every chance to examine and act on it, but chose to do nothing with the information. I reached out to the FBI for comment. Here's Crook's alleged Snapchat account. Here are some comments Thomas Crooks made on his alleged YouTube page before the COVID pandemic. If you're saying Trump is a bad president, you aren't a patriot, as Trump is the literal definition of patriotism. Okay. This is going to be blatantly racist, but I hope Trump has these people murdered. I guess the squad, I guess that's the oh, that group of representatives, I think. I hope a quick and painful death to all the deplorable immigrants and anti-Trump congresswomen who don't deserve anything this country, I suppose, has given them. Science wins. You can't. Not only was he born here, he also belongs here. Ilhan Omar and others are invaders and should honestly be killed and their dead bodies sent back. All right, so if these are really his comments, he certainly has a fascination with announcing who should be killed and such. That's seems not healthy. I hope a quick, painful death to all the deplorable immigrants. So I think we've seen that before. We've seen that before. At somebody else, maybe so. But if the losing Republicans don't like it, they hold all the firepower. 50 million Americans with AR-15s will make quick work of any blockades the government can put to protect the White House. Comment on Trump responds to House intelligence hearing about Ukraine whistleblower complaint. I'm not sure what that means, but again, it's seems to be advocating violence. Um, with the way this country has been going, I think we need a dictator to at least get rid of the progressives and then maybe put these Hispanics back in their place. Okay. Um, Seems a little bit contradictory to his position of being a patriot and definition of patriotism. I don't know if patriotism calls for a dictator. Um, I've noticed a lot of liars talking about the truth in this post. Well, let me tell you some truth. Every one of the Trump-hating Democrats deserve to have their heads chopped off and put on stakes for the world to see what happens when you F with America. Trump defends racist attacks as world leaders condemn. Not sure what that is referencing, but given that it's MSNBC, I would suppose it has a definitely anti-Trump lean in that article. But again, and I don't know how old Crooks is in 2019, but it seems like mom and dad need to step in and say, son, this is, you can have opinions about these things, but let's not be expressing such violent, our opinions in such violent terms. Okay. Nobody deserves to have their head chopped off and put on stakes. Unfortunately, he's got clearly some spelling issues. Mueller should be hanged along with the rest of the Democrats involved in that witch hunt. Sitaram, haha, that's funny because I always believed being patriotic was lining up a bunch of socialist Jews like the ones that booed Trump and blasting their useless brains out with an AR. Well, to each his own. Why is everyone here acting like it is so weird to carry guns and explosives in your vehicle? Like they had a basic self-defense setup for their vehicle that literally any smart person would. All right. Well, I'm an atheist, so I just like guns. So is that true that that a natural consequence of being an atheist is that you just like guns? Um, is that a truism there? I mean, he may have been somebody who was putting faith in guns instead of faith in the one true God. That might be. Um, all right. The earliest known instance of him publicly criticizing the president on this platform occurred in January 2020. In a comment beneath a YouTube video discussing Trump's first impeachment, he wrote, "Keep in mind, the only reason we may know about any of this is because of Trump's stupidity." Um, this remark indicates that crooks believed Trump's own foolishness was what ultimately exposed the underlying controversy. Okay, so this is the comment here. I can see many people getting away with what Trump has done. Billionaires, longtime senators, governors, or really anybody related to powerful people or political parties. Sure, being president makes it even easier, but also keep in mind the only reason we may know about this is because of Trump's stupidity. I mean, he's not really good at hiding things, and I'm willing to bet this sort of conduct happens quite a bit and nobody finds out. Well, here he seems to be favorable towards the COVID-19. Seems that you people don't understand that sometimes public safety comes before your personnel rights. I think he means personal rights. If someone in your family has COVID-19, why wouldn't you want them quarantined? Are you really going to get in the way of trying to stop this pandemic on account of your phobia of government? Seriously, what is wrong with you guys? Okay, so you may have to enter homes and remove family members. Okay. Um, I don't know. I get my guess is that everybody who's was on one side or the other of what was happening with COVID-19, my guess is most everybody had a sense of, regardless of COVID-19, just, if I'm sick and I um, am sick in such a way that I become a nuisance or a source of infection to others, I stay away. I think people understand that, right? I think most people understand that if I realize I'm sick, and especially if I'm running a fever, that I need to stay away from others. Now, sometimes maybe we're not aware of being sick with a fever, maybe, or maybe there are some people that don't understand that, but all right. So apparently here we now these are all alleged to be um, his account comments on his account. Um, one of his last known comments outlined a deeply disturbing endorsement of political violence in the U.S. Um, so I guess that's it there. I'm not going to waste time reading it, but so as Trump began to emerge as the presumptive Republican nominee, Crook's search history revealed an escalating focus on tactical details, strongly suggesting deliberate long-term preparation for a mass casualty attack. And I guess these are searches that he did. Um, Actively used his Quizlet account throughout high school to create flashcard sets for a range of subjects. Um, so he held accounts on three major peer-to-peer payment services, Venmo, Zelle, and PayPal. Venmo and Zelle accounts were registered in his real name. In marked contrast, the PayPal account was created under the pseudonym Rod Swanson. All right, so I guess again, all of this is alleged, maybe not confirmed. The thing that is could be concerning here is if it's really true that the FBI chose to do nothing with the information, right? If that's really true, then what kind of investigation was it, FBI, right? um, now maybe they chose to do nothing with the information because they determined that it either wasn't Thomas Crook's or it was they were unable to confirm that it was actually Thomas Crook's information. Um, but um, we live in a world in which I think we live under the impression that online activity is in some way monitored, right? That maybe there's keywords that trigger something somewhere, and that gives FBI uh, heads up on somebody that might be planning or plotting um, actions like this, so that maybe they can get ahead of it. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Um, I just don't know. It's all right. So I guess I don't have much commentary on those things other than to say what I see happening here. Um, uh, the the thing that I think is of most importance is that we have an FBI that is filled with the best, most truthful investigators, and they do the most diligent investigations possible. Um, Seemed to me that's what's critical. And at this point, the FBI, I think, has a very, very damaged reputation. And so they need to go above and beyond to restore that reputation. Okay, we'll continue with the theme of the FBI here. How the FBI's massive search for the DC pipe bomber stalled. Agents on the Jan 6 investigation scoured sales at Foot Locker, Home Depot, Lowe's, and other stores in a frustrating search for the culprit. Now, there was recently a story about some identification potentially of who the um, J6 pipe bomber was based upon um, an analysis of the person's walk and such. And don't think that that's like crazy science. Um, uh, that can be done. Um, um, Gait and manner of walking and mannerisms while walking and such, that can be analyzed and can be used to identify individuals. This story is based on reporting conducted for the book Injustice: How Politics and Fear Vanquished America's Justice Department. Okay. In the weeks after a mob attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, it's one of those events in history, just it kind of depends on how you frame it. It's kind of like the Civil War. Is it a war between the states? Is it the War of Northern Aggression? Did the mob attack the U.S. Capitol building or were they invited in? The FBI dedicated more than 50 agents to one task, finding the person who had planted a pair of pipe bombs near the Capitol again and again. Agents thought they were closing in on the culprit. Early on, they questioned a Capitol Hill area gym employee who had purchased the same Nike shoes as a person captured in grainy security camera footage. I don't understand. Um, why is it that in these events, when we have these events and we have security footage, it's always grainy security footage when you can go you can go to any store and you can buy a relatively inexpensive camera that provides better quality. I Now maybe the graininess is because of saving uh, low resolution so that the files do not become overwhelmingly large. I mean, I guess that's a possibility. Maybe I don't understand the whole technology, but it's really frustrating that it's always grainy footage. Um, I mean, how does grainy footage help us, right? It seems to me like if I'm in the security business and we're using security cameras, one of the things that I would advocate for are cameras that don't give us grainy footage. Let's have not grainy footage in the security cameras. Then they suspected a man who had been spotted snapping photos of locations outside the Republican and Democratic Party headquarters before the bombs were placed there. Later, agents found an actual bomb maker. He just turned out to be the wrong one. Nearly 5 years later, the identity of the DC pipe bomber is one of the enduring mysteries from the day that triggered the largest investigation in the Justice Department's 150-year history. Wait, really? The largest investigation of the Justice Department's 150-year history. Really? I mean, there's a movie called The FBI Story, stars Jimmy Stewart, and it is like you know, the FBI is the greatest thing that ever got started, and it in part it covers the investigation of a guy who blew up an airplane. Um, I think if I remember the story right, his mom was going to take that plane, and he had somehow put a bomb into her luggage, and purchased insurance, extra flight insurance. I don't know if they have them anymore in the airport. I haven't been in the airport in a long time, but there used to be these like vending machines, and you could go and buy flight insurance from one of these vending machines. And anyway, seemed like that was a pretty big investigation, but all right. It has also become the focus of conspiracy theories and claims that the crime was an inside job, often accompanied by assertions that it was not vigorously investigated. This account of investigative steps taken by the Justice Department shows that the nation's premier law enforcement agency marshaled significant resources in the first year after the attack, mounting a coast-to-coast digital dragnet. The contours of the probe were first described in a report released in January by a congressional committee, but new details are drawn from reporting for the book Injustice. That's this book here. I guess this was really an article that's meant to promote this book, apparently, including interviews with law enforcement officers and government officials, and so on. Some said they were eager for the public to know how intensively the Bureau had investigated the crime. Well, how intensively? How about how extensively? How about investigating to find a solution to the crime? People claiming that we were not pursuing evidence, they don't know what they're talking about with regards to the pipe bomb investigation. One of the people with extensive knowledge of the investigation said, the thing was massive. We devoted a whole ton of resources to it. Last week, several Republican lawmakers latched onto a claim published in the conservative news outlet The Blaze that a gait analysis suggested the person captured on security videos on the night of Jan 5 was a former officer with the Capitol Police. The officer was on duty at the Capitol the following day and testified in some of the first trials against rioters. Steve Bunnell, an attorney for Kirchhoff, voluntarily identified his client by name in a statement to the Washington Post, saying she had been so widely and falsely accused in recent days on social media that she had to push back. These shameful allegations are recklessly false, absurd, and defamatory. Ms. Kirchhoff categorically denies them. Ed Martin, Associate Deputy Attorney General in the Justice Department, dismissed a claim on the social media platform X on Friday that he had determined Kirchhoff was the bomber. This is false. Neither Mr. Martin nor DOJ has made this determination. Martin wrote on X. So Martin talks about himself in the third person. Mr. Martin says, I guess some people do that, but the FBI did not respond to questions about Kirchhoff, but said solving the pipe bomb case remains a high priority for the FBI and our law enforcement partners. All right, so I guess really this is like the teaser to get you to buy the book, I think. But I guess it does suggest that the recent report of the supposedly the person being identified as the bomber has not been confirmed. At least it's not been confirmed as far as that person being thought to be the bomber. Okay. Um, let's look at another article here. And I don't curate these, right? I don't have specific articles that I'm looking for. I just have a list of articles, and I just kind of work my way down the list, and one that seems interesting will grab it. So this was a major red flag in 2008, and now it is happening again. The alarms are getting even louder each week. It has become exceedingly clear that the U.S. economy has entered a crisis that is similar to what we experienced in 2008 and 2009, and a lot of people are really starting to freak out. For those that cannot see the stunning parallels between the Great Recession and what we are going through now, the Great Recession is what was that period called in the 2008-2009 time frame. I think that's a period when the so-called housing bubble burst and things went really bad for a while. There are a lot of people out there that simply choose to believe whatever they want to believe, no matter what the evidence indicates. That isn't one of the most commonly stated things, right? In this case, all the evidence is pointing in a single direction, right? But that sort of assertion is made by most everybody who has a determined agenda that they're pushing, right? So let's see, who is this? This is Economic Collapse Report, right? The economics, they call it the dismal science, because economists, um, I guess, tend to be negative. When foreclosure filings started to spike prior to the global financial crisis in 2008, that was a major red flag. Now it's happening again. During the month of October 2025, foreclosure filings were 19% higher than they were in October 2024. Read the second paragraph in that quote again. Foreclosure activity continued its steady upward trend in October, the eighth straight month of year-over-year increases. The rise is stirring uncomfortable memories of 2008, when a wave of foreclosures triggered the worst housing crash in modern U.S. history. That is what we call a trend. Some of the markets that were once the hottest are now seeing the highest rates of foreclosure filings. What a mess. The good news is that it looks like there will soon be a lot of homes on the market in Florida. Okay. We live at a time when our nation is facing a very serious housing affordability crisis, and this has hit our young adults particularly hard. The following chart, which was once posted by Charlie Kirk, demonstrates how home ownership among young adults has plunged in recent years. These days, a lot of young adults are convinced that they will never be able to become homeowners. Others that have really stretched themselves financially to purchase homes are now being hit with foreclosure notices. I really detest what Wall Street has done to the housing market, and now we are reaping the consequences. Okay, now we need to think for a moment here. Okay. I mean, frankly, I have noticed, uh, and it's hard to say the things because it seems like what ads you end up seeing online, as you're streaming different things, might be curated according to your watch history and that sort of thing. So it may not just be generally available, but for some reason, I have been seeing online a number of ads from some company about, I forget the name of the company, but some company, um, about how they can get you into home ownership. And I hadn't seen mortgage type ads for quite some time. Okay, so when this author says, I really detest what Wall Street has done to the housing market. Okay, I don't know what that means. I don't know what Wall Street has done to the housing market. I just don't know what that means. Um, Now, maybe I'm foolishly ignorant at that point. I don't know. My first reaction to that kind of statement is that that's the kind of reaction that um, consumers generally have when they're frustrated in a marketplace. They throw accusations at the man, the corporation, right? It's their fault. Um, Now, others that have really stretched themselves financially to purchase homes are now being hit with foreclosure notices. Okay. Now, is that Wall Street? Is that what Wall Street has done to them? Hit them with foreclosure notices? Um, Now, I think it can be legitimately argued, why are people really stretching themselves financially to purchase a home? Okay. To me, if a young person is thinking about buying a home, and I were to ask them, well, if you do this, are you going to be really stretching yourself financially? And if their answer was yes, then I would say, well, it's probably a good indicator it's not time for you to buy a home. Doesn't mean you can't have a home. I mean, I used to spend, when I had a real job, I used to spend time teaching um, home buyer, a portion of home buyer education plans. And these were classes. These were classes for first-time home buyers that they were required to take in order to qualify for a ridiculously extravagant loan, a 0% interest, maybe, or not 0%, 0% down loan with a low subsidized interest rate um, that really did stretch people financially. Because at the time, we believed that, you know, we'd be a better, we'd have better communities with more home ownership. And I can recall one of these classes, a young lady uh, who, as I remember it, single mom, relatively newborn child. And the first thing she said to me was, I think I've got it figured out. I can buy the home I want, and my first paycheck will cover the mortgage payment for the month. And I said, um, A, it's not a good budget to have 50% of your take-home pay going to the house payment, right? Now, probably that included, that payment included property taxes and homeowners insurance because that was typically the way they set up those mortgages. But there's upkeep, repair, maintenance that has to be paid for, besides the fact that what are you going to use to pay for groceries, for baby supplies, diapers and things? I mean, and I tried my best to convince her that you're going to be in way over your head. You're not going to be able to do that. She went away confident that she would be able to do that, and that's unfortunate. Um, my as sternly as I could without being offensive, I told her you need to either find a different house that you really can afford, or you just need to be more patient and wait for things to improve for you so that you can purchase that house. But see, oftentimes in articles like this, the rise of foreclosure notices is used to say something the against Wall Street. We'll use their term, against Wall Street, right? What are they doing sending out foreclosure notices? But you can just as easily say, well, what are these others, young adults, doing that are really stretching themselves financially to purchase a home? What are they doing? Right? I mean, here's the way it was back in 2008, okay? I mean, this was when I was immersed in teaching a financial management part of these home buyers classes. And here's what was happening because of the alleged benefits to having a higher percentage of people as homeowners. Loans were being made to people that would otherwise not qualify for that loan. But it was all part of this plan to increase home ownership because we knew that that would make our communities better. Okay. So think about what's happening, right? Think about what's happening. You're a mortgage officer. You sit down with a client, they're applying for a home loan, and you see that they under normal circumstances they don't qualify. But we have a special program Okay. And so in your mind, you know that the loan you're about to approve for this person or this couple, um, they do not demonstrate the financial history, the financial resources to be able to maintain those payments on that home. And yet, because of the incentives that are provided, you approve that loan for them. And then what? We're surprised when they can't make their payments and there's a foreclosure. Now, think about the person. You are so determined to become a homeowner that you set aside all of your reasonable calculations of where are we at financially and what can we really afford as a monthly mortgage payment. And you just place yourself in the hands entirely in the hands of the loan officer that says we can qualify you for this. And we pretend like that means that we, as the people taking out the loan, that means that we can actually um, make those payments, right? Um, I kick myself because I realized that I did not take my dad's advice as seriously as I should have. I didn't follow his advice nearly enough. Um, but as I was growing up and things came up about purchasing something or whether it could be afforded or not, and one thing my dad always said, really corny, but he said, well, you got to put a pencil to it. And that's what people need to do. They need to put a pencil to it and stop thinking that just because somebody else says we can qualify for something doesn't mean that it is actually reasonable for us to do, right? Loan officers and banks and such say somebody can qualify for something based on whatever kind of incentives or backroom deals or whatever programs are going on that benefit them. There are two sides to this issue, right? I mean, I'm not going to argue for a moment that you don't have banks and such that are um, wanting to qualify as many people as they can, right? Because the normal pattern for home loans is that a bank qualifies somebody, they make the loan, and then they immediately or nearly immediately sell that loan to some other company that's going to manage the mortgage, some other company that's going to take on the risk of that loan being successfully repaid. And the bank just gets, whatever amount of money they get up front, they make their money then, and they move on to the next um, wannabe homeowner that they can qualify. Given that we have a history like that, maybe, I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but maybe there should be some kind of a rule in place that the the organization that initiates the loan has to hold that loan for some number of years, right? Let's take a look at um, how long it takes, on average for individuals that really stretch themselves financially to end up in foreclosure. What's the typical number of months for that? Okay. Let's just pretend like it's, within 3 years, um, individuals that are borderline qualified end up in a foreclosure on average, right? What if we made a rule that said if you originate the home loan, you have to hold that note for 5 years before you can sell it, right? And so if the homeowner, survives that 5-year period without going into foreclosure, then okay, the bank can then look for an opportunity to grab the money for that note and pass it on to somebody else. But if when that if within that 5 year period, if that bank has been making loans to people that they can qualify because of incentives and programs that are in place, but they can't make those payments, and it ends up in a foreclosure, that bank has to deal with the issues of foreclosure. And I can tell you that banks don't want to have to deal with foreclosures. It's not like banks are looking for opportunities to foreclose on properties. That's a very expensive process for them, time consuming. They would much rather have every loan be a successful loan that gets paid back the way it's supposed to get paid back. But see, they don't have to deal with that if immediately they can just sell the note and now it's somebody else's headache, right? And especially when these kind of high risk notes get all bundled up into um, the kind of investment opportunities where people are buying into mutual funds and such, they end up including one of these funds based on mortgages, high risk mortgages. And then everything collapses and that fund collapses as well. And now the hurt is spread out a bunch of other people and not necessarily the bank that originated the loan. Um, all right. Well, I don't doubt that there are always red flags in our economy. Um, the it's the nature of free market economies that things go well and then things correct, and there can be a time of turmoil. I mean, any market does not just constantly increase. In fact, if any market just constantly became more and more valuable over time, nobody would make money at that point, right? Um, like investing in the stock market, it's because stocks go down, or you could say stocks go on sale, that people have an opportunity to actually make money because they can buy things on sale and they can take advantage of those sale prices as stocks go down and then they go back up. And it would be the same with any market, right? Of course, this market is much more complicated, as a lot of markets are, because there's an intervener in the marketplace that that disrupts the marketplace, sends wrong signals to producers and consumers, and leads to producers and consumers making bad decisions. But they seem like good decisions because of the signals that this intervener in the marketplace is sending. And the intervener is government, government regulation, government incentives, government programs, blah, 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 subsidized interest rates, and whatever. Um, and that's what I would say before we think about anything else, before we think about going after Wall Street or going after banks or whatever, let's do everything we can to get government out of that marketplace, right? I mean, government's involvement in a marketplace is when somebody has been charged with evil doing in the marketplace. They're fraudulent, right? They're bearing false witness. They're involved in theft, okay? Not, incentives because we need more home ownership, we think, or, whatever incentives. All right. I spent too much time ranting on that article. Let's see what else we can find here. Um, okay, so here's, you know, we're still talking about Epstein, to like when President Trump was frustrated that are we still talking about Epstein? But it says here, this article says here, this is from Washington Post. Epstein appeared to text with House member during Cohen hearing, documents show. Newly released documents from the convicted sex offender's estate include text messages from him that appear to influence the lawmaker's questions to Trump's personal attorney at a 2019 congressional hearing. Okay, so I read every word correctly. I'm not sure I understood exactly what I was reading there. Let's see what the article says. The newly released documents from Epstein's estate show that the convicted SO appeared to be texting with a member of Congress during a congressional hearing with Michael Cohen, President Donald Trump's former personal attorney and fixer, and that those text messages may have influenced the lawmaker's questions of Cohen. In the text, Epstein appeared to be watching the Feb 2019 hearing in real time and at one point informed the person he was texting, whose name is redacted from the documents, that Cohen had brought up former Trump executive assistant Ronna Graff in his testimony. At the time, Cohen was testifying by the House Oversight Committee against his former boss, alleging that Trump was racist, manipulated financial records, and directed hush money payments to cover up his extramarital affairs. Allegations Trump denied. Now, um, the whole business of directing hush money payments to cover up extramarital affairs, um, apparently that's not an uncommon thing that is done. Uh, it's interesting that this House committee apparently could, think that this is a horrible thing that's been done by President Trump. And I'm not saying, well, extramarital affairs are obviously wrong, not just wrong, they're sinful. Um, uh, but it's just interesting that the House Oversight Committee would pursue this as though this really demonstrates that President Trump is really bad, and yet apparently we don't hear much about this anymore. But apparently there was a whole fund set up for the House of Representatives so that representatives could use that fund to pay off individuals to shut them up regarding similar type matters. Like, um, it is the um, Pharisaical way, maybe. I don't know. It seems like a typical um, way for many to act in accusing and going after somebody for doing the very thing that you're doing. Was that projection or whatever they call that? The president said on social media that Cohen was lying before testimony began. Cohen brought up Ronna, keeper of the secrets. Um, Epstein texted the person misspelling Graff's first name. Ronna, the person responded, "Quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym?" The person added, suggesting they would question Cohen soon. "That's his assistant," Epstein replied. The copies of the text messages were included in a trove of thousands of pages of documents containing Epstein's emails and other communications released Wednesday by the House Oversight Committee. The messages show Epstein was invested in what Cohen was sharing about Trump, the financier's former friend, during his testimony. Trump has provided different accounts about why he ended his decades-long relationship with Epstein and has tried to distance himself from the deceased SO, but he has previously denied knowing about Epstein's abuse. "I had no idea. I haven't spoken to him in many, many years." Though the name of Epstein's texting partner is redacted in the documents, timestamps on the text messages matched up with video from the hearing, as well as the message's contents, appear to indicate that Epstein was texting with Delegate Stacey Plaskett, a Democrat who represents the U.S. Virgin Islands as its non-voting delegate in the House of Reps. Reached by phone Thursday, Plaskett declined to answer questions about the text messages and directed all inquiries to her congressional staff. Plaskett's chief of staff, Angelin Jabbar, said Thursday she was not in a position to confirm or not whether the congresswoman was texting with Epstein. All right. At around 10:40 a.m. Eastern Time on the day of the hearing, A broadcast feed cut to Plaskett, showing her moving her mouth as if she were chewing something. At 10:41 a.m., Epstein sent this message to his texting partner. Are you chewing? Not anymore, the person replied. Chewing interior of my mouth. Bad habit from middle school. At 12:50, Epstein asked his texting partner, how much longer for you? Hours. Go to other meetings, the person replied. The quick I'm up next text Epstein was sent at 2:25 p.m., minutes before Plaskett began questioning Cohen. Epstein messaged good work to his texting partner at 2:34, 1 minute after Plaskett finished her questioning. The text messages indicate Epstein may have influenced what questions to ask Cohen. He's opened the door to questions regarding who are the other henchmen at Trump Organization. Yep, very aware and waiting my turn. All right, so all right, so anyway, yeah, so there's been things released, I guess, by the Democrats on this committee, and I think the effort is to try to, regardless of what the content of any emails are, whatever, there are efforts to implicate Trump, or at least cast Trump in a bad light because his name can be associated with Epstein, right? I think that's the whole purpose of what they're doing in release. They don't really care about what the content is or whether the content is truly incriminating or not. They think it's incriminating enough to be able to get the news media to report that, oh, we've now got emails where Trump's name shows up in Epstein emails. And you know what that means? Um, yeah, I don't know what it means. And, it seems to me that this, I mean, I don't know what the truth is about why um, Trump was so adamant, it seemed, prior to the election that we're going to get those Epstein files released. Then after the election, it's like nothing happens, or what ends up getting released on a big kind of show turns out to be stuff that's already been released, and it's just nothing, and it makes them look foolish. They've looked foolish through this whole thing. Um, I think they should have held to their word. We're going to release the files, and here they are. And at some point, at some point when you are trying to clean house, right? You can't be overly selective. If you really want to clean things out, you just have to get all the junk out of the drawers, right? You just got to get all the junk out of the drawers. And um, I would say, in some regards, or as regards some aspects of, say, the FBI or the Justice Department or the CIA, we just got to get junk out of the drawers, okay? Um, because unless and until you do that, everything is questioned, right? I mean, this would be like, um, a friend of yours that you um, have to confront them about some issue, and they're only partly, making a part admission to what you are confident is the sin or what have you. And until there's a full confession, um, everything's open to question, right? It's when there's and I'm talking about a circumstance where, let's say this friend has committed an offense against you, right? Until there's a full and open confession of that and a full opening of that junk drawer so that all of that stuff can come out and proper forgiveness can be asked and proper forgiveness can be given, that then a relationship can be repaired. And I would say it's not happening. It's not happening with these government agencies. They're the government agencies that have been long been accused of not conducting things properly, of doing things in a dastardly way behind the scenes, right? In regards to those things, they're not opening that junk drawer and saying, here it is, right? Here's the mess we've made of this investigation, whatever investigation they would be exposing or revealing. And, things are going to fall out from that. People are going to get caught up in that because they're going to be exposed for some inappropriate activity or something. But if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be because unless and until that junk drawer is opened up and everything is brought to light so that we can clear the matter, every investigation is questioned, every action is questioned, right? The next big investigation that the FBI is involved in, I don't know, there's maybe a recent event, that reveals this, right? That we can't trust you. Why should I trust you? All right. I don't really care to get into the bogged down into the Epstein files and all right, let's see what else we can find here. Um, let's see what Steve Bannon is saying here. Steve Bannon. Nick Fuentes takes down conservative Inc. in a debate that lays bare the old guard's collapse. Fuentes takes this guy apart brick by brick. It's a full takedown. Okay, so I don't know much about this Nick Fuentes, other than how he's classified as a anti-Semite. I think he's been declared a Nazi, and um, uh, you know, I have listened to clips of him. I watched part of his interview with Tucker Carlson. Um, I don't know. I find it annoying because I feel like he's always yelling. I just like stop yelling and talk to me. Um, but I mean, in what I've heard, he seems knowledgeable. I don't know that I agree with him on things or Steve Bannon breaks down the split between the new populist right and the old conservative Inc. class by pointing to a viral debate where Nick Fuentes dismantles Dinesh D'Souza on Alex Jones. Okay, so Dinesh D'Souza is maybe a somewhat popular conservative or has been. I don't know. I haven't, of course, I don't really follow it, but I haven't seen him as much other than recently I've seen some posts of his on X or whatever. Not because I do anything on X, but because of other things I watch, he is referenced. And um, I don't really, I don't really find myself thinking that Dinesh D'Souza is really that compelling a person to be um, listened to carefully and followed closely. Now, you can correct me. That's why there's comments, right? So correct me on these things. But I do know that there has been apparently this kind of division on the right, so-called, and it seemed to explode when Tucker Carlson interviewed Nick Fuentes on his podcast. And then Ben Shapiro reacted viscerally to that. And primarily not because, as I understand it, and I again comments comment away and correct me on this, but not because he saw in Nick Fuentes anything that was um, necessarily anti-American, I'll say, but because Ben Shapiro has determined that Nick Fuentes is an anti-Semite. And so, because he's an anti-Semite, he is not to be listened to. All right. That's Ben Shapiro's, as I understand Ben Shapiro's thinking in regards to this. Um, Now, all right. So, and so that's brought up, calls apparently to um, kind of cancel Tucker Carlson, I guess. And like, why are we why are we not allowed to have discussion, right? Why are we not allowing um, or why are we demanding that those who we have labeled to be a certain thing must not be listened to, must not be platformed, as they say? Um, I'll leave it at that because I think it can get into some deep weeds to talk about some of these matters. But let's see if we can read the text here. If you want to see new versus old and just see the facts, I should play it here on War Room in the 6 o'clock hour. Alex Jones had a debate with Nick Fuentes and Dinesh D'Souza, and you can see right there the laziness, the lack of argument, the attitude that they just own this. Fuentes takes this guy apart brick by brick. It's a full takedown because the kid shows up. He's prepped, he's ready, he's on point, and he's always on attack. He happens to have something called facts, and he just overwhelms Dinesh. Dinesh goes back, and it shows you this old guard who has nothing. None of their policies have worked. If the policies had worked, why do we have so much debt that's out of control? And they were part of the problem. Why we spread off a hell's half acre and spent I'm not sure what that refers to, spent $9 trillion dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan while we had a foreign policy and a commercial policy that allowed and paid for the rise of China. They were all part of that. That's not just Democrats. It's the Uniparty, and Conservative Inc. is the clapping seals of the Uniparty. They did nothing. They had no fight. They never fought back. You go back to the stage of the 16 or 17. Go back to the stage of the 16 or 7. None of those could beat Hillary Clinton. I guess he's talking about the 16 or 17 Republican candidates. Look at the campaign for Sears in Virginia and the Commonwealth and the governor's race in New Jersey. They are running on a playbook from the 1990s. It doesn't work anymore because they allowed it to change against America and American workers. Remember H-1Bs? All this that is still being paid for by the United States and China. They might write an editorial in the Wall Street Journal and they might talk about it in some salon in the Upper East Side of New York, but that is all they're going to do. Okay, it's kind of hard to um, uh, maybe make sense of what is being said here, having not watched the debate, and I don't really want to watch the debate here. Um, I'll just, um, I think I'll just comment on a few of these things, right? Um, it seems to me that one of the major challenges in politics is to remain relevant without abandoning fundamental principles. Okay. Um, right. And so it seems to me that remaining relevant can mean that there needs to be some shifting on policies and such. There needs to be the recognition that no no policy is a sacred cow that is not to be questioned, right? I mean, this is a this has been a frustration of mine in various positions I've been in, and working with group of people, or talking about issues that um, so often in the group, the discussion only centers on trying to find a way to fix what's already in place, right? It's like you have a car that's breaking down, and all you're thinking about is, okay, so what part can we fix next to try to keep this car running? And that maybe it's just time to move on to a different car, right? So, maybe like the number of let's just say conservatives who are constantly um and maybe um to their credit, striving against the local public schools and trying to get them to, I don't know, be better or be different, as though the only option available to us is to have a public school system, right? Maybe it's time that, according to the last popular vote for president, a majority of the population, voting population, was conservative. Maybe it's time for that majority to simply walk away from the public school system and say it's time to get a new car. It's time to get a different system, and stop thinking the only way things can be done is the way the public school system does them. It's just time to drop that. Um, and I think that's some of what's maybe I think that describes some of what's happening in present circumstances, where there's within the, let's say, the conservative party, there are a good number of individuals, and it seems to be mainly younger people, that are thinking, look, it doesn't have to be the same way as has always been done by the older um, conservatives, right? It doesn't have to be that way. Maybe it's time to abandon particular policies and approach them differently. And in abandoning certain policies, it doesn't necessarily mean a rejection of whatever principles were driving those policies. It means an acknowledgement of um, the prevailing circumstances, right? The prevailing um, alignment of players and individuals and nations in regards to a particular policy. Maybe that's, but I think it is turning out to be a a the unfortunate fight that happens within an organization when they've recently gained an important victory, right? And so, just thinking in broad terms of conservative as compared to progressive or liberal, right? This major victory of president, House, and Senate all um, conservative, right? And yet conservatives aren't able to embrace the victory and move forward together. We start fighting with each other, and so that we suck the benefit out of the victory. Um, and there ends up being a fight with each other because there are those within the establishment of the conservatism that insist that there are things that are um, not to be questioned, when it seems reasonable that those things are to be questioned. So, regarding I mean, with the H-1Bs, and that can lead to student visas and such. It seems odd to me that there is, regarding student visas, there's this desire to bring in um, so many students from China, when I would argue that the circumstance between the United States and China is eerily similar to the circumstance between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. I would argue that um, what's happening between the United States and China to some degree is the new Cold War. And we've had repeated circumstances providing significant evidence that um, China, in multiple ways, is infiltrating this country with essentially spies to grab hold of technology, to um, cause disruption. And, you know, those who are charged with, in part, the responsibility of ensuring the safety of this country, I think they need to look long and hard at what we're doing. I'm pretty confident. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this. I guess I don't actually know the numbers. Um, but I would think that at the height of the Cold War, there would be a lot of scrutiny. There would have been a lot of scrutiny about those from the Soviet Union coming to this country, right? Not defecting to the country, not, saying I want to get out from under the oppression of Soviet dictatorship, but um, yeah, I think there'd be a lot of scrutiny, and I don't see that scrutiny is happening either with um, H-1Bs or um, students from China. I don't see that that's happening. And I would just say, as someone who and you can check out my Wednesday evening podcast, my midweek study podcast, where I'm reading through an election sermon from 1874, Christianity and National Law. And I think that the evidence, please view the most recent video from that podcast, because the pastor who's preaching that sermon goes through um, a litany of evidences that this country is a Christian nation. Okay, so I want you to think about this. All right, I think it's generally accepted that when Solomon becomes king, he starts off with a good heart. Right? You remember that um, God says, "Ask and I'll give it to you," and he doesn't ask for riches. He doesn't ask for material wealth, or he asks for wisdom, and he's commended for that. Okay. And so I would argue that you could say that when Solomon begins his reign as king, he is a Christian king over a Christian nation, or like unto that. I guess it wouldn't necessarily be right to call it Christian because Christ hasn't come yet, although um, I'm of the opinion that Old Testament saints were actually Christians. Hebrews tells us that Moses um, did not discount the reproach of Christ in what he did in walking away from the Pharaohship and going to be with his own people. So that suggests something. But um, let's equate Solomon when he begins as king as uh, similar to a Christian nation that was formed. I don't know, 1776. All right. And then what happened with Solomon, right? Well, he kind of did his own version of the H-1B, and um, allowed into this Christian nation all manner of diverse women with diverse views, whether religious or cultural, and simply incorporated them into his nation. And it's generally regarded that Solomon's kingship ended in a horrible state, right? Don't forget that the kingship of Solomon is the kingship that resulted in a divided nation. That's just, I'm just saying there's parallels, right? This nation was clearly founded as a Christian nation. It was clearly understood that um, any who came to this nation, um, it wasn't that they had to convert to Christianity in order to get into the nation. In fact, it wasn't that they were required to convert to Christianity at any point living in this nation. But they certainly should expect that the laws would be in accordance with the principles of the Christian religion. And they shouldn't expect that laws would be modified or new laws would be passed accommodating their non-Christian religion. But that's certainly changed. That certainly changed. Just like Solomon, who had his H-1B program, and a bunch of people, women, are brought into his kingdom that they don't. It's not that they come in with different views and then they assimilate to the let's call them Christian views of Solomon's kingdom. No, um, their celebrations continue. Their pagan rituals are incorporated, and um, it becomes very destructive to the nation. Yeah, it becomes very destructive to our nation. Um, I think there's I think there's a comparison there that's um, worth pursuing. Okay, well maybe look at one more article here, because I see that Mike Johnson has a really in this photo he has a really sad face, and so maybe we need to look at this article. Now, this isn't the photo that I was referring to, a different photo. But it says here, Senate's sneaky payout in shutdown deal has Mike Johnson livid. A last-minute addition to the bill that finally reopened the government after its record-breaking shutdown has ignited fury among House Republicans, exposing cracks in party ranks over what many see as a self-serving grab by senators. Reports from closed-door meetings indicate even mild-mannered Speaker of the House Mike Johnson was livid when he learned of the last-minute addition. I don't know that he looks livid there. I don't think he looks livid in the other photo that I'm referring to either. The provision slipped into the legislative branch appropriations bill lets certain senators sue the U.S. government for damages tied to former special counsel Jack Smith's January 6 investigation, codenamed Arctic Frost. It targets cases where the Department of Justice subpoenaed phone records without notifying the affected lawmakers, a move that reeks of the kind of unchecked surveillance conservatives have long warned about from federal agencies. The clause specifically allows senators to seek up to 500,000 in compensation, but only for themselves, not for President Trump or everyday Americans who face similar intrusions. This exclusivity has fueled accusation that it's nothing more than an insider perk funded by taxpayers to settle personal scores for the probe that ensnared 8 Republican senators' data through subpoenas to companies like Twitter, now X. Ted Cruz defended the insertion, telling Politico it was meant to give real teeth to protections against DOJ overreach, but not all senators are eager to cash in. Dan Sullivan has no plans to sue, according to his advisor, while Ron Johnson echoed that sentiment. I have no plans at this time to sue. If I did sue, it would only be for the purpose of using courts to expose the corrupt weaponization of federal law enforcement by the Biden and Obama administrations. Well, how noble of you, Ron Johnson. On the House side, the backlash was swift and pointed. Speaker Johnson admitted he was blindsided. I was just as surprised by the inclusion of that language as anyone. I had no prior notice of it at all. I was frustrated, as my colleagues are over here, and I thought it was untimely and inappropriate. He's now pushing for a fast-tracked vote next week to strip it out, urging the Senate to follow suit. Rep. John Rose, who introduced repeal legislation, called it out for its narrow focus. The American people should not be asked to make compensation to United States senators, the ultimate insiders, if you will, who have been wronged, no doubt in my mind. This provision does not allow other Americans to pursue a remedy. It does not even allow the President of the United States, who was equally wrongfully surveilled and pursued by the Justice Department. They didn't even include President Trump in this. They saved this special treat for themselves. Yeah, so that feels kind of slimy, right? I mean, but probably not surprising, you know. I suppose sometime maybe on a random cast, maybe we could look into um, some kind of information data about um, the wealth increase of those who begin, they begin their political career, House or Senate, and then at the end of their political career, and how much wealth they've accumulated. I mean, um, there have been recent reports about the circumstance for Nancy Pelosi, but she by no means is the only one who, um, began a political career, rather modest amount of wealth, and ended a political career with millionaire, multimillionaire, what have you. Um, yeah, so I think uh, I forget who said it, but once representatives have figured out how they can vote in such a way to enrich themselves, you got a serious problem, right? And I would argue any representative, regardless of how much good that representative had done before, any representative who is found to engage in voting patterns that tend to enrich themselves, they need to be voted out of office. That is a character quality that should not be in the life of an elected representative. And um, yeah, it's just they need to be booted. Okay, we've gone about an hour and a half, and I've rambled on about a bunch of different things, and I'm sure I've said a lot of things that deserve corrective comments. So as you view this video, please post those corrective comments to help me out, right? Let's start a dialogue, right? As I see those comments, and then in later episodes, I can, maybe use those comments as a springboard for looking at other news articles or news stories, what have you, to try to get more clarification on those things. Um, so there you have it, my Friday night random cast. I hope it was informative for you, got you to think about things. And Yeah, so I hope you found it helpful, and I hope that you would be willing to share it with others and say, "Hey, you should listen." And even if it's, at about the 33-minute mark, he said something really smart, maybe. I don't know what I said at the 33-minute mark, but just getting people to view even portions of the video. If you like it or you like what I'm doing, hit the like button. Don't forget the other podcasts that we do during the course of the week. On Tuesday nights, we have our Lantern's Quest podcast. Right now, we are exploring a sketchbook of Christ that is the Gospel of Mark. I think we're heading to episode 21 next week. And, you might want to check that out if you haven't been following along. Bring up the previous podcasts in that series and increase the playback speed and view those and get caught up so that you can join us next Tuesday as we continue that study. On Wednesday nights, I do my midweek study, and right now I'm reading through an election sermon, 1874, Christianity, a National Law. We're about halfway through the 52-page sermon, and so you can join me for that on Wednesdays. Fridays, this Randomcast, where we take a look at just a few of top news stories and try to think about those things. What do they tell us? What do we understand? Maybe how should we think about them? And even if I don't specifically um, bring up a Bible verse or um, trying to reason from the benefit of biblical principles and biblical understanding as we think about those circumstances. All right. Well, thanks for joining me. You all have a wonderful night and wonderful weekend, and I would hope to see you on Tuesday for Lantern's Quest as we continue that series, and maybe 3 nights a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. You can join me for the podcast that we're doing. Y'all have a good night, and we'll see you again.